Hello, good people of YouTube. Sealord here, and today I'm bringing you guys my top 5 ships that have aged like fine wine. What does that mean? Well, that means that these ships, unlike so many others, haven't been power crept or faded out of relevance over the years, but they've at least held their own, or in the case of most of these ships, gotten better over the years and have really come into their own. Which means they've managed to avoid the fate that so many other ships have suffered in this game. Now, before we get into the list, if you do enjoy historical firearms, particularly World War II era firearms, you should check out yesterday's video where we featured the Mass 36, one of the French main battle rifles of the Second World War. If you have an interest in that, please check that out. But anyway, on to today's list. As always, this is all 125% my opinion. Just want to make that clear. And let's go ahead and get on into it. Coming in at number 5 with the Tier 10 Techline German cruiser, the Hindenburg. Now, Hindenburg's back here at 5 because while she has received quite a few buffs over the years, she hasn't really changed too much, and she's not exactly, top dog in the cruiser world, but for a ship that's as old as she is, she's managed to keep up pace quite well. And that's helped by the fact that she still has quite a decent reload on her 12 guns, and she's got that wonderful German AP. The German AP for the cruisers has very high alpha, and if you're foolish enough to give a Hindenburg your broadside, oh, buddy, you're going to have a terrible day because you're going to get the absolute crap chunked out of you. Now, in the situations where she cannot use her AP to either chunk the crap out of a battleship or a cruiser, whatever she's coming up against, she can swap over to her HE. While it is the anemic German HE, the fire rate will manage to, in most cases, make up for that, either by setting fires or, again, just by making sure your 12 shells get there in a regular fashion. So, pretty much whatever you're going to be going up against at the Hindenburg, you can deal with them in one way or the other. Now, she is, of course, a German cruiser, which means she has some very weird geometry about her. And yes, it's not uncommon for a Hindenburg to eat a stray shell and randomly lose like 40% of its HP. But then again, even at tier 10 with today's World Warships, what cruiser cannot have that happen to them? Even the Petropavlovsk got herself raised up out of the water to now you can do that to her. So I wouldn't say that's a uniquely Hindenburg thing. But on top of that too, she has a very high degree of utility with her hydroacoustic search and her torpedoes. Hydroacoustic search, of course, a few updates ago tripled in value with the addition of submarines. So she's got that going for her. She's got the German torpedoes as well, which means when you do get close into the enemy ships, you have those aces up your sleeves for those close encounters. And she's just, again, a lot of fun to play from my opinion personally. And with the way that the meta works, being able to, shove as many shells downrange as you can, as fast as you can in a heavy cruiser is a pretty solid thing, especially when you can do it from range like the Hindenburg can. She's a great off-flank kiter if you need a ship that just has to annoy the absolute crap out of the enemy team and you don't have like a Nevsky on standby. The Hindenburg is a ship that very much can do that, but at the same time too, she can get it in close, she can get in other ships' faces, and given her armor scheme at close range, she can take on quite a few battleships and come out on top if the captain of the Hindenburg knows what they're doing. So all in all, a great cruiser, a cruiser that's just refused to be power crept, although you probably could argue very well that she has been power crept, but she can still keep up in today's World of Warships, and that is why she's number 5. She can keep up, but she herself hasn't, kind of come into her prime time or anything like that, but she's just a great all-around cruiser, one that, again, I do love to play. So going on down now to number 4, we have the Tier 10 American Techline battleship, and there's one of 3 it can be, the Montana. Of course, it's going to be the Montana. One of the 2 original Tier 10 battleships in this game. The Montana still does very well in today's World of Warships. While she doesn't have overtly large guns like so many other Tier 10 battleships do, she doesn't have any type of crazy armor scheme, no type of insane gimmick. She just has guns, has armor, has a certain, parameter about her, and that's it. Back before we needed gimmicks and all on our ships left, right, and center, just a solid battleship through and through. Now, what does definitely help the Montana is the fact that she does have 12 16-inch guns, which are pretty small by today's standards when it comes to tier 10 and super ships, but she does of course get that wonderful American super heavy AP that gives her 16-inch guns, that much more alpha and allows them to punch a bit above their weight class. Add on top of that the consistent dispersion that you get with the American battleship dispersion pattern and the Plotting Room Mod 2 module that the Montana can take, which gives you good consistent dispersion with your 16-inch guns with that super heavy AP. And now you're doing good, consistent damage. And especially if you figured out how to aim with the super floaty American AP shells, you're really putting some pain downrange with the Montana. Now, the Montana was, for many years, a really solid battleship. But there was a point in time with the increase of large caliber guns at higher tier, the CV rework, and the addition of more and more HE spammy ships that the Montana and the other high tier American battleships weren't really doing that well. What Wargaming did is they went in and they gave them an improved heal. So now from the North Carolina, or really from the Colorado on up, you have this improved American battleship heal that rejuvenated the line, shall we say, and gave them a much better fighting chance at higher tier. So now they are really great ships. I mean, the North Carolina is one of my personal favorite tier 8 battleships. The Colorado, when you're not grinding through it, isn't that terrible. But the Iowa, a historical ship, a ship that definitely deserves to be relevant in this game, is relevant once again after these changes. And the Montana, the pinnacle of the line, is brought back into the main stage with that buff that they got those years ago, and that buff has managed to be that's just the only push they really needed in order to keep these ships as a whole, and of course the Montana, relevant in today's World of Warships. The Montana is a great ship for dealing with cruisers, a great ship for punishing broadsides, and she, again, thanks to that heal, is I'm not going to say just as tough as the ships that she faces, because again, she's dealing with super ships, but she's one tough cookie when you have the commander in here that knows how to angle, they can balance their damage con along with that heal. And speaking of damage con, they do get the American improved damage con on the Montana, so you have that damage con that can run for over 20 seconds, especially if you build into it, and during those 20 plus seconds, no fires, no flooding can get started on you. So again, a great ship that if you need a ship just to sit somewhere and be a thorn in the enemy team's sides. Montana's a ship that isn't entirely uncommon in clan battles and more competitive modes when it's one of the choices, depending upon again how the ship bans are going for that season. But again, the good consistent guns that you get with the Montana are an amazing upside on the ship. And then the buff they gave to the heal is just that little bit of life that it needed a couple years ago when that happened. Going down to number 3, we have a most unlikely ship, and that is the tier 9 Japanese battleship, the Izumo. Now, the Izumo, for you newer players, is a ship that for a very long time was just absolute painful to play, and was definitely one of the low points, in my opinion, for the Japanese battleship line. Actually, the lowest of the low. But something happened. Wargaming actually listened to the community and probably saw that the stats in the Izumo were kind of taking, and gave her quite a few buffs over the years. She got a buff to her mid-deck section for the armor there, to where that's no longer 32 millimeters of armor. If you notice, Izumo has a huge deck, and all that used to be 32 back in the day, and you could pin that with, of course, IFHE on most light cruisers, and pretty much, every large cruiser, heavy cruiser could pin that deck armor. So they buffed the deck armor, they buffed the pin on her guns, they straightened out the barrels on the Izumo's guns a little bit, and what do you know? It's an actual decent ship now. You see that little bit of help there, and she's really coming to her own in today's World of Warships. And it was so weird going from, and it is still pretty weird, going from the Amagi, a tier 8 essentially battle cruiser, to the Izumo, which is definitely a battleship, big, slow, you got huge guns, and, well, I say huge, they're 400, the Japanese 16-inch guns, you have the 10mm guns, but they do hit like much heavier guns thanks to the improvements that have been made to the Izumo over the years. But yeah, you go from that fast battle cruiser in the Yamagi to a kind of a lumbering slow dreadnought now in the Izumo, and the gun placement is a little weird. You have all 3 turrets in front of the superstructure, but turret number 3 faces backwards, so when you are having to switch, from port to starboard, that 3rd turret does have to take the long way around, so that's kind of awkward. But once you get used to it, you can really take advantage of that angle. This thing's got some incredibly thick side armor, so once you figure out how to get the angling down with the Izumo, you are a proper tough cookie. And now that, again, your mid-deck isn't pinnable by everybody and their mom, you can sit there and take quite a bit of damage before you are eventually sunk. And look at the ship, too. There's virtually no superstructure on this thing, so fires tend to not happen too much unless they hit your deck. You don't have that huge, like city superstructure that the German battleships have. There's barely any of it on the Izumo, so that does make it a little bit more painful for those that are trying to farm fires off of you or trying to, of course, pin your superstructure, because again, there's barely anything on there. But she's grown very, very, very well over the years, and again has gone from being one of the worst ships in the game in my opinion to definitely one of the better tier 9s in my opinion. So going down to number 2 now, we have the Tier 9 American destroyer, the Fletcher. Now, I don't have the Fletcher, but you do know what I see plenty enough at Tier 9? Fletchers. Fletchers every freaking where. And I certainly do have enough premium variants of the Fletchers to have essentially played the Tier 9 stock ship already. But the Fletcher is a destroyer that you want to do some torpedoing, it can do some torpedoing. You want to be a gunboat, you can be a gunboat. You want to be a stealthy cap contester, you can be a stealthy cap contester. She really does everything, and that is the thing with the American lines. They are typically jack of all trades, masters of none, and the Fletcher is definitely one of those for sure. Again, you want to be a little stealthy torpedo boat, run around and toss your torpedoes and sink some battleships. She can do it. You want to be that little rabid chihuahua that guards your team's cap or goes capping. She can definitely do it with the lovely American 127s that she does have. And the Fletcher does, of course, get the American smokescreen, that incredibly long smokescreen that you can sit in and absolutely melt whatever battleship or cruiser is trying to push your smokescreen while still throwing torpedoes in their face. So it's a really powerful DD, one that I am far overdue to actually grind out the real deal. But I mean, I've played enough with the Kid, the Black, the Greek one whose name is forgetting me whose name is slipping my mind at this moment, and there's another 2 or 3 premiums out there, I do believe. And of course, we're still all awaiting the introduction of the Johnston Wargaming. If you want to print out money, again, just make the Johnston a thing. That'll probably clear you in the profits for the next half a year. Just my personal opinion, though. But yeah, Fletcher, excellent destroyer, one that's been prevalent for the past 8 years in the game, and one that I definitely don't see going anywhere. And finally, that takes us down to our number 1 slot, and that is the Tier 6 Premium British battleship, the Warspite. The Warspite is God. I think it came out, the 2nd year or 3rd year of the game's existence. And it's a premium, right? And premiums tend to be, even back in the day, tended to be a little bit more gimmicky than others. But with the Warspite, not really. I mean, she's got the Warspite heel. That's definitely a gimmick, but that's an improved heel, so definitely hasn't been power crept in those regards, especially at Tier 6. And she's got those 15-inch guns with the good accuracy that basically she's a Tier 6 Yamato. That's been her nickname for years, the Tier 6 British Yamato, and she still very much can do that. Her 15-inch guns allows her to overmatch the common armored thresholds that you find at Tier 6, so you don't really care about the enemy's armor because you don't need to. Your shells go right through them, finds their citadel, and sends them back to port quite quickly. Not to mention, too, she's actually pretty darn maneuverable for, what she is, this dreadnought-style battleship. She can turn on a dime, and she's relatively quick for that tier. And, I mean, hell, a lot faster than some of the Americans' battleships that you find there in that tier range for sure. And she's just a blast to play. I mean, The Warspite is truly one of the best ships in this game. If you haven't managed to pick her up in an event or in one of those, please come back messages that Wargaming sends you every so often if you take a break from the game, she's definitely well worth the money, in my opinion, to pick up, because she's an excellent ship, great guns. The armor's a little squishy, but you got that Warspite improved heal to help you out through that. And, I mean, with all that she has going for her, the day that this thing gets power crept is... something's very much wrong with the game at that point if they ever manage to power creep the Warspite at tier 6, because, good God, she's really a tier 6 battleship that truly does not care if she gets up tier to tier 8. You have 15-inch guns. Those are big guns by tier 8 standards, let alone tier 6, right? So, an excellent battleship, one I'd highly recommend you pick up, one that's proven the test of time, and if anything, has gotten better with time. So guys, those are my top 5 ships that have aged like fine wine. Let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. What ships would you remove from this list? What ships would you add to it? Hope you guys have a wonderful Monday and a wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.